The crystal chandeliers of the Rosewood Manor cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, their murmurs of anticipation filling the ornate ballroom. Victoria Hayes adjusted her catering uniform for the third time in as many minutes, her hands trembling slightly as she surveyed the elaborate wedding setup. At 24, she had worked dozens of high society events, but none quite as lavish as the union between tech mogul Daniel Whitmore and socialite Claudia Vanderberg. The ceremony had concluded without a hitch, and now the reception was in full swing, with Victoria and her team responsible for ensuring every detail remained flawless. She had arrived at the venue that morning with dark circles under her eyes, the result of another sleepless night in her cramped studio apartment. The eviction notice taped to her door 3 days ago still haunted her thoughts, a constant reminder that she was exactly 2 weeks away from homelessness. Her mother's medical bills had drained every penny of her savings, and despite working 2 jobs, Victoria found herself drowning in debt that seemed to multiply with each passing day. This wedding represented more than just another catering gig. The generous tip she hoped to receive could buy her another month of time. The bride and groom made their grand entrance to thunderous applause, and Victoria retreated to the kitchen to oversee the first course. That's when she heard it. A piercing wail that cut through the classical music like a knife. She glanced through the service door to see a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit standing near the back of the ballroom, a baby carrier in his arms, and an expression of pure desperation on his face. The infant's cries grew louder, drawing uncomfortable glances from nearby guests. Victoria recognized him immediately. Marcus Thornton, the 32-year-old CEO of Thornton Industries, a manufacturing empire that had revolutionized sustainable packaging. She had seen his face in business magazines her father used to read before he passed away, but the articles never mentioned a baby, and there was no wedding ring on his finger. The child, who couldn't have been more than 4 months old, had turned an alarming shade of red, tiny fists flailing as Marcus attempted every soothing technique known to parenthood. "Everything all right out there?" Chef Pierre asked, his thick French accent colored with concern. Victoria nodded absently, unable to tear her eyes away from the unfolding scene. Marcus had moved toward the exit, clearly trying to minimize the disruption, but the baby's screams only intensified. She watched as he tried a bottle, a pacifier, gentle rocking. Nothing worked. Other guests began to shift uncomfortably, and Victoria noticed the bride shooting daggers in Marcus's direction. This was supposed to be Claudia's perfect day, and a screaming infant was definitely not part of the plan. Something in Victoria stirred. Perhaps it was the memory of her younger sister, whom she had practically raised after their mother fell ill. Perhaps it was the raw vulnerability she saw in Marcus's eyes, so at odds with his powerful business persona. Whatever the reason, she found herself removing her apron and walking toward them before her rational mind could intervene. "Excuse me," she said softly, approaching Marcus as he stood in the marble foyer, bouncing the baby with increasing desperation. "I don't mean to intrude, but would you mind if I tried?" Marcus looked at her, his steel-gray eyes reflecting equal parts hope and skepticism. "You work here?" "Catering staff," Victoria confirmed. "But I have experience with babies. My little sister had terrible colic. Sometimes they just need a different touch." He hesitated for only a moment, before carefully transferring the baby into her arms. The infant was a beautiful little girl, with wispy blonde hair, and Marcus's distinctive gray eyes. Her face was streaked with tears, and her cries had taken on a hoarse quality that suggested she'd been upset for quite some time. Victoria adjusted the baby against her shoulder, positioning her in a way that applied gentle pressure to her tiny stomach. She began to walk in a specific pattern. 3 steps forward, gentle bounce, slight sway, 2 steps back. It was a technique her grandmother had taught her, passed down through generations. She hummed softly, an old lullaby her mother used to sing, barely audible beneath the baby's wails. For a long moment, nothing changed. Marcus watched with the exhausted expression of a man who had tried everything and expected nothing to work. But then, gradually, the baby's cries began to soften. Her rigid little body started to relax against Victoria's shoulder. The screams turned to whimpers, and the whimpers to small hiccuping sounds. "How are you doing that?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace. "She's overstimulated," Victoria explained quietly, continuing her rhythmic movement. "All the noise, the lights, the people, it's too much for her, and she probably has some gas trapped. The position I'm holding her in can help with that. The baby let out a small burp, and Victoria felt the tiny body go completely limp in her arms, finally surrendering to exhaustion. Within minutes, the infant was asleep, her rosebud mouth slightly open, one small hand clutching Victoria's uniform. Marcus stared at Victoria as if she had just performed a miracle. "I've been trying to calm her down for an hour. My nanny called in sick this morning, and I couldn't miss this wedding. Daniel's my college roommate. I thought I could handle it, but..." He ran a hand through his dark hair, disheveling its previously perfect style. "I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Thornton. And this is Isabel." "Victoria Hayes," she replied, still swaying gently. "She's beautiful." "She's a handful," Marcus said with a tired smile. "I've only had her for 6 weeks. Her mother, my ex-fiancé, she left us both. Decided motherhood wasn't for her and signed away all her rights. I'm still figuring out this whole single father thing." Victoria's heart clenched at the pain she heard beneath his matter-of-fact tone. Before she could respond, Chef Pierre's voice boomed from the kitchen. "Victoria, where are you? We need you for service." Reality crashed back. She was supposed to be working, not holding a stranger's baby in the foyer. "I should get back," she said reluctantly. "But she should sleep for a while now. Just keep the environment calm and..." "Wait," Marcus interrupted, his hand lightly touching her arm. "I know this is unusual, but would you consider staying with us, just for the reception? I'll pay you double whatever you're making tonight. Triple. I can't go through that again. And I need to be here for Daniel." Victoria's mind raced. Chef Pierre would be furious. She might lose her position with the catering company. But triple pay? That could cover her overdue rent and buy her precious time to figure out her situation. "I'll need to clear it with my supervisor," she said. 10 minutes later, after a tense negotiation that involved Marcus personally speaking with both Chef Pierre and the catering company owner, Victoria found herself sitting in a quiet corner of the venue's library, Isabella sleeping peacefully in her arms. Marcus had returned to the reception, promising to check on them every 15 minutes. As she sat in the leather chair, surrounded by mahogany bookshelves and the muted sounds of celebration from the ballroom, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just shifted in her life. She looked down at Isabella's peaceful face and wondered what chain of events had truly been set in motion when she decided to help a desperate father and his crying baby. What Victoria didn't know was that Marcus had already made a decision of his own, one that would change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The reception continued in full swing as Victoria remained in the library with Isabella. True to his word, Marcus appeared every 15 minutes, each time looking slightly more relaxed when he found his daughter still peacefully asleep. During his 4th check-in, he lingered longer than before, leaning against the doorframe with a glass of champagne in his hand. "You're a lifesaver," he said, his voice carrying genuine gratitude. "I was seriously considering leaving, and Daniel would have never forgiven me. He's been planning this wedding for over a year." Victoria smiled, adjusting the blanket around Isabella. "She's an angel when she's sleeping." "How long have you been doing this alone?" Marcus's expression darkened slightly. 6 weeks, like I said, though it feels like 6 years. My ex, Carolyn, she left when Isabella was just 2 weeks old. Walked out of the hospital after a routine checkup and never came back. Left a note saying she couldn't do it, that she'd made a mistake and needed to find herself. He laughed bitterly. Find herself. As if our daughter was just an obstacle to her self-discovery. "I'm sorry," Victoria said softly. "That must have been devastating. The worst part is that I barely know what I'm doing. I've built a multi-million-dollar company, negotiated deals with Fortune 500 corporations, but a 4-month-old baby? She terrifies me." He paused, seeming to realize he was oversharing with someone he'd just met. "Sorry. I don't usually unload on strangers. Sometimes strangers are easier to talk to," Victoria offered. "No judgment, no expectations." Marcus studied her for a moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. "What about you? How does someone with your gift for calming babies end up working catering at weddings?" Victoria felt her cheeks warm. "It pays the bills. I actually have a degree in early childhood education, but teaching positions are hard to come by without experience, and I can't afford to take an unpaid internship. So I work catering events at night and at a coffee shop during the day. That's 2 jobs." "When do you sleep?" "When I can," she said with a shrug, not wanting to delve into the specifics of her situation. The last thing she needed was pity from a billionaire CEO. Before Marcus could respond, Isabella stirred in Victoria's arms, making small mewing sounds. Victoria immediately began the gentle swaying motion that had worked earlier, and the baby settled back into sleep without fully waking. "How do you do that?" Marcus asked, genuine wonder in his voice. "Practice." "I raised my little sister from the time she was a baby. My mom got sick when I was 16, and someone had to step up. Kids respond to confidence and consistency. They can sense when you're uncertain." Marcus nodded slowly, then pulled out his phone. "I have a proposition for you, Victoria, and I want you to hear me out before you say no." Victoria's stomach tightened with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Okay. I need a nanny. My current one is 68 years old and wonderful, but she has health issues that keep her from being reliable. I've gone through 3 agencies in 6 weeks, and no one seems to work out. But you," he gestured toward Isabella, "you're natural with her, and you have the education background. What if you came to work for me? As your nanny?" Victoria's mind reeled. "Mr. Thornton, I appreciate the offer, but Marcus, please, and before you refuse, let me tell you what I'm offering. $60,000 a year, full benefits including health insurance, and you'd live in the guest house on my property. It's a 2-bedroom cottage, fully furnished, with complete privacy. Your hours would be Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, with occasional evening or weekend events where I'd need you to travel with us. You'd have your own car to use, and any additional hours beyond the agreed schedule would be overtime." Victoria's breath caught. $60,000. Health insurance. A place to live. It was more than double what she made working her 2 jobs combined, and she'd actually be using her education, but something felt too good to be true. "Why me?" "You don't know anything about me. I could be anyone." "You could be," Marcus agreed. "Which is why I'd need you to agree to a background check and provide references. But I trust my instincts, Victoria, and my instincts tell me you're exactly what Isabella needs, what we both need." "I need to think about it," Victoria said, her mind spinning with possibilities and concerns. "Of course, take the weekend, but I meant what I said earlier. You're already making triple your catering rate tonight just for sitting here with her. That should tell you I'm serious." A knock at the door interrupted them. A tall man with kind eyes and a slightly crooked bow tie poked his head in. "Marcus, they're about to do the toasts. You're up after the best man. Thanks, Daniel." "I'll be right there." Marcus turned back to Victoria. "That's the groom. I really need to go, but you have my number now. Call me with your answer by Monday." Victoria nodded, still processing everything as Marcus hurried out. She looked down at Isabella, who chose that moment to open her eyes and stare up at Victoria with those striking gray eyes. The baby made a small cooing sound, and something in Victoria's chest tightened. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. Victoria stayed in the library, occasionally walking the halls with Isabella when the baby grew restless. She fed her a bottle that Marcus had left, changed her diaper using supplies from an expensive designer bag, and marveled at how natural it all felt. Around 9 o'clock, Marcus returned to collect his daughter, his tie loosened and his formal jacket discarded. "She was perfect," Victoria reported, carefully transferring the baby back to her father. She ate 4 ounces around 7:30 and had a clean diaper change at 8:15. Marcus looked at her with something akin to awe. "You're absolutely sure you need to think about my offer? Because from where I'm standing, this seems like a perfect fit." Victoria hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Mr. Thornton, Marcus, I'm being evicted from my apartment in 2 weeks. I'm behind on my mother's medical bills, and I have student loans that are about to go into default. If I take this job and it doesn't work out, I'll have quit my other positions and be in an even worse situation than I am now. I need to be sure this is real and not just a desperate decision made at a wedding." Instead of being put off by her candor, Marcus nodded with what looked like respect. "I appreciate your honesty. How about this? Come to my house on Sunday afternoon, see the cottage, meet my regular nanny, Mrs. Peterson, and spend a few hours with Isabella in a normal environment. If you still feel uncertain after that, we'll call it a trial period. 3 months, guaranteed salary even if I decide it's not working. That gives you security while you figure out if this is right for you." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. It was more than generous. It was life-changing. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time that evening it reached his eyes. Because 6 weeks ago I was a guy who thought he had everything figured out. Then I became a single father overnight, and I realized I don't know anything at all. You helped me tonight when you didn't have to, expecting nothing in return. That tells me more about your character than any resume ever could." He wrote an address on the back of his business card and handed it to her. "Sunday, 2 o'clock. Just text me to confirm you're coming." Victoria took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'll be there." As she watched Marcus leave with Isabella secured in her carrier, Victoria felt the weight of her current life pressing against the possibility of something entirely different. She thought about her eviction notice, her mother's medical bills, the endless cycle of working 2 jobs just to stay barely afloat. Then she thought about Isabella's peaceful face and the way Marcus had looked at her with desperate hope. By the time she finished her shift and collected her pay, Marcus had indeed tripled it, leaving her with more money than she'd made in the past 2 months combined. Victoria had made her decision. She pulled out her phone and typed a text to the number on Marcus's card. "I'll see you Sunday at 2 p.m. Thank you for this opportunity." His response came within seconds. "Thank you for saying yes. See you Sunday." Victoria walked to her car through the cool night air, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. She had no idea that Sunday's visit would reveal a complication that would test everything she thought she knew about Marcus Thornton and the life he was offering her. The fairy tale she'd imagined was about to collide with a reality far more complex than a simple nanny position, because Marcus hadn't told her everything about Isabella's mother, and the secrets he was keeping would soon unravel in the most unexpected way. Sunday afternoon arrived with unseasonably warm weather, the kind of day that made everything feel full of possibility. Victoria drove her aging Honda Civic through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, watching as modest homes gave way to estates with sprawling lawns and iron gates. When her GPS announced she'd arrived at Marcus's address, she had to double-check the screen. The property before her was breathtaking, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and stone, set back from the road and surrounded by mature oak trees. She pulled up to the call box at the gate, her heart hammering. This was really happening. She pressed the button, and Marcus's voice crackled through the speaker. "Victoria, come on in. Follow the driveway around to the left. You'll see the guest cottage." The gate swung open silently, and Victoria drove through, her eyes widening as she took in the manicured gardens and the main house that seemed to float among the trees. Following Marcus's directions, she found the cottage, a charming structure that looked like something from a European village, with ivy climbing its stone walls and window boxes full of colorful flowers. Marcus was waiting outside, Isabella on his hip. The baby wore a yellow sundress and had a bow in her wispy hair. When she saw Victoria, she made an excited gurgling sound and reached out her little arms. "Someone remembers you," Marcus said with a grin, and Victoria felt her heart melt a little as she took Isabella into her arms. "Hey, sweet girl," Victoria cooed, and Isabella responded with a drooly smile that showcased her toothless gums. "Come on, let me show you around." Marcus led her into the cottage, and Victoria had to suppress a gasp. The interior was beautifully appointed with comfortable furniture, a full kitchen with modern appliances, and large windows that let in streams of natural light. He showed her the master bedroom with an ensuite bathroom, the second bedroom that could serve as an office or guest room, and the small back patio that overlooked a garden. "This is incredible," Victoria breathed. "You're sure this would be included? All part of the package," Marcus confirmed. "I want you to be comfortable. A happy nanny means a happy baby. Or at least that's what Mrs. Peterson always tells me." As if on cue, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes appeared at the cottage door. "Marcus, dear, I thought I heard voices. You must be Victoria." Over the next hour, Mrs. Peterson walked Victoria through Isabella's routine, showing her where supplies were kept in the main house, explaining the baby's feeding schedule, and sharing insights about her temperament. The older woman was warm and encouraging, clearly relieved that someone capable might be taking over the primary care responsibilities. "My arthritis has been acting up something terrible," Mrs. Peterson confided, when Marcus stepped away to take a phone call. "I love that little girl, but I can't keep up the way I used to. Marcus needs someone young and energetic, someone who can grow with Isabella. I think you might be perfect for this." They moved to the main house, where Marcus gave Victoria a tour. The nursery was a soft sage green, with hand-painted murals of forest animals. Isabella's schedule was posted on the wall, along with emergency numbers and detailed notes about her preferences. Everything was organized, almost obsessively so. "I like structure," Marcus explained. looking slightly embarrassed. It helps me feel like I have some control over a situation that often feels completely out of my control. Victoria was playing with Isabella on a soft mat in the nursery when she noticed a photograph on the shelf. Marcus with a stunning woman with long dark hair, both of them laughing at some unseen joke. Her stomach tightened uncomfortably. "Is that Isabella's mother?" she asked before she could stop herself. Marcus's expression shuddered. "Yes, that's Carolyn. That was taken about a year ago, before everything fell apart. She's beautiful. She was a lot of things." Marcus's voice had gone flat. "Look, Victoria, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have mentioned at the wedding. But I was desperate and afraid you'd run if you knew the whole truth." Victoria's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Marcus sat down heavily in the rocking chair, running his hands through his hair. Carolyn didn't just leave because she couldn't handle motherhood. She left because she never wanted Isabella in the first place. The pregnancy was unplanned, and I convinced her to go through with it. I promised her we'd have help, that she wouldn't have to sacrifice her career, that we'd make it work. But after Isabella was born, Carolyn spiraled. Postpartum depression, the doctor said. But it was more than that. She resented me, resented the baby, resented the life she felt trapped in. Victoria listened, holding Isabella a little closer. The day she left, she told me she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, and it wasn't Isabella. It was trusting me when I said everything would be fine. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. She signed away her parental rights and moved to Paris. I haven't heard from her since, except through her lawyer regarding the termination of rights paperwork. But here's the thing, Victoria. Carolyn comes from one of the most prominent families in the city, the Van Horns. Her brother is Gregory Van Horn, the district attorney. I don't understand. What does that have to do with me being Isabella's nanny? Marcus met her eyes, and she saw genuine concern there. Carolyn's family blames me for everything. They think I manipulated their daughter, trapped her with a pregnancy, and drove her away. Gregory has made it clear that if he finds any reason to question my fitness as a parent, he'll pursue custody on behalf of the Van Horn family. They have money, power, and connections that rival my own. If they decide to come after Isabella, it will be an all-out war. Victoria felt her hope deflating like a punctured balloon. And you're telling me this now because? Because any nanny I hire becomes part of that potential battle. Gregory has investigators who watch this house. They'll look into your background, your history, everything. I need you to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just about caring for a baby. It's about being part of a family that's under constant scrutiny. The room felt suddenly smaller. Victoria looked down at Isabella, who had fallen asleep in her arms, completely oblivious to the complicated adult world surrounding her. Have they found anything to use against you? Not yet. I've been careful. But I'm also exhausted and barely keeping my head above water. I need help, Victoria, but I won't lie to you about the risks involved. Victoria stood, pacing the nursery with Isabella. Her mind raced through everything Marcus had told her. This was so much more complicated than she'd imagined. But then she thought about her eviction notice, her mother's medical bills, the constant anxiety that had become her daily companion. She thought about her degree in early childhood education, collecting dust, while she served coffee and passed hors d'oeuvres. And she thought about the way Isabella had reached for her, the way Marcus had looked at her with desperate hope. I need to know one thing, Victoria said finally. Are you a good father? Not perfect. I know perfect doesn't exist, but are you trying? Do you love your daughter? Marcus stood, crossing to where she stood by the window. I love her more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I'm terrified every single day that I'm going to mess this up, but I'm trying. God, I'm trying so hard. Victoria saw the truth in his eyes, the exhaustion, the fear, but also the fierce determination. She made her decision. I'll do it. I'll take the job. Relief flooded Marcus's face. Really? Even knowing about the Van Horns? Even knowing about the Van Horns. But I have conditions. I want everything in writing. The salary, the cottage, the benefits. And if this situation with Isabella's maternal family escalates, I want to be kept informed. No surprises. Done. Absolutely done. Marcus extended his hand, and Victoria shook it, feeling the firm grip of someone sealing a deal that went far beyond employment. They spent the rest of the afternoon working out details. Victoria would give 2 weeks' notice at her current jobs and move into the cottage at the end of the month. Mrs. Peterson would stay on for the first week to help with the transition. Marcus would have his lawyer draw up a comprehensive employment contract. As Victoria prepared to leave, Marcus walked her to her car, Isabella dozing on his shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I know this is asking a lot, but I hope, this is going to work out for both of us." Victoria smiled, though a flutter of nervousness danced in her stomach. "I hope so too." Driving home, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something much bigger than a nanny position. Marcus Thornton had secrets. His ex-fiancée's powerful family was watching from the shadows, and she was about to move into the middle of it all. But as she thought about Isabella's sweet face and the cottage that would soon be her home, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: excitement about the future. What Victoria didn't know was that her arrival in Marcus's life would trigger a chain of events that would bring Carolyn Van Horn back from Paris, and the confrontation that would follow would force everyone to face truths they'd been avoiding. The real story of Isabella's birth and Carolyn's departure was far more complicated than Marcus had revealed, and the secrets about to surface would test every assumption Victoria had made about the man who had just become her employer. 3 months passed in a blur of bottle feedings, diaper changes, and baby giggles that filled the cottage with unexpected joy. Victoria had settled into her role with an ease that surprised even her. Isabella thrived under her care, hitting developmental milestones and filling out into a chubby, happy baby who lit up whenever Victoria entered the room. Mrs. Peterson had officially retired after the first month, tearfully hugging Victoria and whispering that she was leaving Isabella in the best possible hands. What surprised Victoria most, however, was her growing relationship with Marcus. Their interactions had evolved from strictly professional to something warmer, more personal. He'd started joining them for Isabella's bedtime routine, and they'd often linger in the nursery afterward, talking about their days. Marcus had opened up about the pressures of running his company while being a single father, and Victoria had shared stories about her own childhood, her sick mother, and her dreams that had been deferred but not forgotten. On a crisp October evening, Victoria was making dinner in the cottage when Marcus knocked on her door, his expression troubled. Isabella was already asleep in the nursery of the main house, having worn herself out during an afternoon of tummy time and exploration. "Can I come in?" he asked, and Victoria noticed he was holding a large envelope. "Of course. Is everything okay?" Marcus sank onto her couch, the envelope clutched in his hands. "Carolyn's back in town, and she wants to see Isabella." Victoria felt her stomach drop. "What? After all this time?" "Her lawyer contacted mine this afternoon. Apparently she's been in therapy in Paris and has realized she made a mistake. She wants to establish visitation rights and potentially pursue joint custody." "Can she do that?" "She signed away her rights. It's complicated. Her lawyer is arguing that she was suffering from severe postpartum depression and wasn't in her right mind when she made that decision. They're claiming I pressured her, that I didn't give her adequate support or time to recover." Marcus's voice was bitter. "The Van Horns are backing her financially and legally. Gregory has already filed preliminary paperwork questioning my fitness as a parent." Victoria moved to sit beside him, her mind racing. "What does this mean for Isabella, for you?" "It means we're going to court. It means investigators will be crawling all over our lives, looking for any reason to claim that Isabella would be better off with her mother, or with the Van Horns." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes haunted. "It means I might lose my daughter, Victoria, and I can't let that happen." Without thinking, Victoria reached out and took his hand. "You won't. You're an amazing father. Anyone who spends 5 minutes watching you with Isabella can see how much you love her." Marcus squeezed her hand, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them shifted, charged with an awareness that had been building for months. Then Marcus pulled away, standing abruptly. "There's something else. The investigators are going to look at everyone in Isabella's life, including you. They'll want to know about our relationship, about why I hired you, about everything." He paused, his back to her. "Victoria, I need to be honest with you. Hiring you that night at the wedding, it wasn't just because you were good with Isabella." Victoria's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" Marcus turned to face her. "I was attracted to you. From the moment you walked up to me in that foyer, offering to help when you had absolutely no reason to. I was drawn to you. And over these past 3 months working with you, seeing you with my daughter, getting to know you." He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I've developed feelings for you, real feelings, and that's going to complicate everything." Victoria stood, her legs feeling unsteady. "Marcus, You don't have to say anything. I know this is inappropriate. You work for me, and I've put you in an impossible position. But with everything that's about to happen, I couldn't keep lying to you or myself. The Van Horn's investigators will see the way I look at you. They'll twist it into something ugly. Claim I hired you for inappropriate reasons, or that there's something improper happening under my roof. Then we'll tell them the truth," Victoria said, her voice stronger than she felt. "That you hired me because I was qualified and good with your daughter. That whatever feelings have developed came later and haven't affected my ability to do my job or your ability to parent Isabella." Marcus looked at her with something like wonder. "You're not quitting? Why would I quit? Isabella needs me. You need me. And..." Victoria took a deep breath, deciding that honesty was the only path forward. "And I have feelings for you too. I've been trying to ignore them, telling myself it was just gratitude or some kind of misplaced hero worship. But it's more than that. These past 3 months have been the happiest I've been in years, and it's not just because of the job or the cottage. It's because of you, because of the family we've built together." The words hung between them for a long moment. Then Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you sure? Because once we go down this path, there's no going back. The Van Horns will use it against me. Carolyn will claim I replaced her with the nanny. It's going to get ugly." "I'm sure," Victoria whispered. "Let them come. We'll face it together." Marcus kissed her then, a kiss full of months of restrained longing and the promise of something real. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Victoria saw tears in Marcus's eyes. "I don't deserve you," he said softly. "Yes, you do. And Isabella deserves both of us fighting for her." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, depositions, and investigations. Carolyn returned from Paris looking elegant and composed, her lawyers painting a picture of a woman who had suffered from a mental health crisis and was now ready to be a mother. The Van Horns threw their considerable weight behind her claim, and the media picked up the story with relish. Billionaire CEO accused of driving away baby's mother. Victoria and Marcus's relationship became public knowledge when a photographer caught them leaving a legal meeting together, Marcus's arm protectively around her waist. The headlines grew more sensational. CEO replaces socialite ex with nanny, and single father's romance complicates custody battle. Through it all, Victoria remained steady. She sat through uncomfortable depositions where Carolyn's lawyers tried to paint her as an opportunist who had seduced her employer. She provided character witnesses, documentation of Isabella's thriving development under her care, and testimony about Marcus's dedication as a father. She refused to be intimidated, even when Gregory Van Horn himself tried to suggest she was unfit to be around his niece. The custody hearing took place on a gray November morning. Victoria sat in the courtroom, watching as lawyers presented their cases. Carolyn took the stand, tearfully explaining her postpartum depression and her regret at leaving. She looked beautiful and sympathetic, and Victoria felt a cold fear settle in her chest. Then Marcus took the stand. He didn't make excuses or try to demonize Carolyn. Instead, he spoke honestly about his mistakes, about not recognizing the severity of Carolyn's mental health struggles, about his own fears and inadequacies as a new father. He talked about the nights he'd spent awake, terrified Isabella would stop breathing. He described learning to change diapers, make bottles, soothe colic, all while running a company and dealing with the devastation of abandonment. "I'm not a perfect father," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But I've been there every single day. When Isabella was sick at 2 a.m, I was there. When she smiled for the first time, I was there. When she learned to roll over, to sit up, to eat solid food, I was there. Not because it was easy, but because she's my daughter, and I love her more than anything in this world." Then he talked about Victoria. "Ms. Hayes didn't seduce me or manipulate her way into our lives. She helped a desperate man with a crying baby at a wedding, expecting nothing in return. She took a job knowing it came with complications and scrutiny. She's helped Isabella thrive and helped me become a better father. Our relationship developed naturally, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to Isabella's well-being. I won't apologize for falling in love with someone who loves my daughter as fiercely as I do." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face as Marcus spoke. She saw several jurors wiping their eyes as well. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Morrison, listened to all the testimony, reviewed the evidence, and finally rendered her decision. This court recognizes that Ms. Van Horn suffered from a legitimate mental health crisis following childbirth. However, the voluntarily signed away her parental rights after receiving legal counsel and medical evaluation. Mr. Thornton has demonstrated consistent, dedicated parenting for 9 months. The child is thriving in his care. While this court encourages Ms. Van Horn to seek therapy and potentially rebuild a relationship with her daughter in the future, at this time, primary custody will remain with Mr. Thornton. The courtroom erupted. Carolyn began crying, and her mother rushed to comfort her. Gregory Van Horn's face was thunderous. But Marcus simply closed his eyes and let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for months. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Marcus made a brief statement, thanking the court and expressing hope that eventually, Isabella could have a relationship with her mother when Carolyn was ready. Then he took Victoria's hand and led her through the crowd to his car. That evening, after Isabella was asleep in her crib, Marcus and Victoria sat on the porch of the cottage, wrapped in blankets against the November chill. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, pulling Victoria closer, "about the future, about what comes next. What do you mean?" "This cottage was always meant to be temporary, a place for the nanny to stay." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "But you're not just the nanny, Victoria. You haven't been for months. You're the woman I love, the woman who helped me become a real father, the woman I want to build a life with." Victoria's heart raced. "Marcus, I'm not proposing. Not yet. We've been through too much chaos, and I want our next chapter to be built on solid ground, not crisis and courtroom drama. But I'm asking you to move into the main house. Not as an employee, but as my partner. As Isabella's..." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "As Isabella's mother, if you want that. Because that's what you've been, Victoria. That's what you are." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. She thought about the girl she'd been just months ago, drowning in debt, facing eviction, working herself to exhaustion with no hope in sight. She thought about the night she'd heard a baby crying at a wedding and made the choice to help, not knowing it would change her entire life. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it. Yes to being your partner. Yes to being Isabella's mother. Yes to building this life together." Marcus kissed her as the first snow of the season began to fall, soft flakes drifting down from the darkening sky. Inside the house, Isabella slept peacefully, unaware of the conversation happening on the porch, but safe in the knowledge that she was loved, protected, and cherished. 6 months later, on a spring afternoon filled with cherry blossoms and sunshine, Marcus and Victoria were married in a small ceremony in the garden behind the main house. Isabella, now 15 months old and toddling around with determined steps, served as flower girl with Mrs. Peterson's patient assistance. The guest list was small. Marcus's college friends, including Daniel and his wife Claudia, a few close colleagues, and Victoria's mother, whose health had stabilized with the help of the insurance coverage Victoria's position had provided. Carolyn sent a gift, a silver rattle with Isabella's initials engraved on it, along with a note expressing her genuine happiness for them and her hope that someday, when she was healthier, she might be able to be a small part of Isabella's life. It was a start, a first step toward healing old wounds. As Victoria stood in her simple white dress, holding Marcus's hands and looking into the eyes of the man who had somehow become her everything, she thought about the unexpected paths life takes. A crying baby at a wedding had led her here. To love, to family, to a future she'd never dared to imagine. "I love you," Marcus whispered, as they were pronounced husband and wife. "I love you too," Victoria replied. "All of you. Forever." Isabella chose that moment to toddle over, wrapping her small arms around both their legs and demanding, "Up! Up!" They laughed and lifted her between them, and as their small family embraced, surrounded by friends and spring flowers and endless possibility, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every hardship, every moment of doubt had led her exactly where she was meant to be. The crying baby at the wedding had given her more than a job. She had given her a family, a love story, and a life beyond her wildest dreams. And this, Victoria thought, as Isabella planted a wet kiss on her cheek and Marcus pulled them both close. This was the real happily ever after. Messy, complicated, beautiful, and absolutely perfect.